Well, I would like to invite Professor Cecília Machado of the Getúlio Vargas Foundation and Mrs. Maria Eduardo Falcão to bring some light to this table. So the average age also is better. Well, we have two bright young women in our table. Cecília Machado is professor at the EPGE, Getúlio Vargas Foundation, got a PhD from Columbia University in the United States. And Maria Eduarda Falcão has a bachelor from the University of Virginia and is a leader on education in Brazil and CEO of Eleva Education. I guess she was born CEO. She was so young that... So let's begin with the Professor Cecília Machado that will talk about the effects of a centralized college admission mechanism on migration and college enrollment. Evidence from Brazil. You have 10, 15, 20 minutes. It's up to you.
So this is joint work with Christiane Sherman. And as the title says, we're going to be studying the effects of migration, the effects on migration and dropout rates of Brazil introducing a centralized college admission system, which is called Sisu. Just to put this into perspective, in the United States, when we think of the college high school wage premium, the trend that has been well documented in the literature is that there has been increase in the college wage premium in the United States, likely explained by the rising demand for skilled workers, skilled bias technological change being one of these explanations. In Brazil, the trend is completely reverse, as Marcelo Neri has shown in his presentation in the morning. What's happening here is a decreasing wage differential, and there's other explanations that have been guiding this decreasing wage differential, one of them being possibly rising minimum wage, but also the increase in supply of college students. But still, the numbers that Marcelo has shown, the college wage premium is still very high, and one could ask, can we actually increase the fraction of college? Since this premium is so high, how do we increase the fraction of college graduates in Brazil? And a reasonable mechanism is through this centralized mechanism, which has been implemented in Brazil. Putting the Brazilian higher education system into perspective, before 2010, the higher education system was highly decentralized in the sense that each institution had its own admission score and would select based on these on their own scores, and the best scoring, but always very meritocratic in the sense that the best scoring students were the ones that were to be admitted. After 2010, the Ministry of Education implements Sisu, which is a platform that allocates students to institutions based on a unique test score. So actually what I'm going to be doing here is evaluating a package of things which includes a unique test score being used through a centralized admission system. The institutions that can benefit from this platform are not all institutions. So the public institutions, this platform was made available to public institutions, and it was not mandatory. They consent to participate. And in order to participate, students would just have to take the ENEM exam, which is this only exam, unique exam that, or score that feeds into Sisu. And what happens is that this platform calculates the relative demands for the courses, what is the cutoff score, and it also gives information to students on whether or not they qualify or for being admitted. So what we're going to be doing in this paper is trying to understand the effects of switching from a decentralized system to what I called not fully centralized, but partially centralized system, admission system. There are several benefits that we can list, but I think that there's a widely believed argument that it improves coordination, but we can also list other benefits here. For the applicants, it's a big cost reduction for them. They only have to take one exam, lower information costs. Instead of investigating the deadlines in which universities have open vacancies, they just look in the system, it's readily available to them. Lower monetary costs, it's just one application fee for ENEM, which is not very expensive. Lower time cost, and lower geographical barriers, because you can take the exam in the place where you live. You don't have to travel close to the university where you want to apply to. For the universities, also lower admission costs. One benefit is that it could potentially attract students that were not on their target area, that are from other regions. And also benefits for other institutions, as everybody takes ENEM. Even if you're not in Sisu, you could also use ENEM scores to admit students as well. So over time, there has been an increase in the ENEM test takers, and also on universities that are not in the Sisu platform, but also take advantage of these ENEM scores. We investigate the effects of Sisu on migration and college enrollment. So Sisu was implemented in 2010. These are short-run outcomes. As we would expect, it increases migration, and it's a sizable effect, around 2 to 4 percentage points, around 6 to 14% increase in migration. So migration is if you go to college in a state or a municipality that is different from your origin. And I'm going to be clear, we consider several types of migrations variables. We also find that, surprisingly, we would expect this to be a very good system because it coordinates applications, but we do find some effects on dropout rates, and I'm going to talk why in first-year dropout rates, that's the measure that we have. Migration could be one possible reason, though I'm going to show you some results that rule out this explanation. So if there's a cost for migrating, possibly you could be more likely to drop out if these costs are higher. I'm going to show you some evidence that this is likely not the main reason, but we do point out to some strategic behavior in college application. It has to do with the design of this mechanism, how students can rank their options. There's a huge literature, theoretical literature, empirical literature, which I'm not going to have time to talk about, but I would like to mention that there is a recent paper talking about, this is in a revision in an important journal, talking about disadvantages of moving from a decentralized system to a centralized system. The features are not exactly what we have here in Brazil. There are a couple of differences, but still pointing out to the importance of moving from decentralized system to centralized systems. And an empirical paper done for Germany looking at the opposite, moving from a centralized to a decentralized system for a few degrees. So I think we add nicely to this empirical literature on the evidence of these effects. So talking about the timing of the higher education policies, the test that is used to feed, so there are two things. There is the test, the unique test called ENEM, and there is the platform that allocates students that is called Sisu. ENEM was created in 1998. It was created with the purpose to evaluate, not as an entrance exam for higher education, but to evaluate education before college. in September of 2008, MECI, the Ministry of Education, announces that it's going to be used as a national standardized score for entrance to higher education. And over 2009, the rules were announced, which institutions would adopt it and so on, how it would be, how many spots would be allocated for this new platform. And students took the exam in December of 2009, and in January of 2010, the Sisu platform becomes available, and it's feeded in with the test scores from ENEM. So ENEM existed way before, but only in 2010 it's used in this system, the Sisu, to allocate students. It has become very important in Brazil. So this is the evolution of students taking ENEM. And if we look here in this axis, this is the ratio, just to give you a magnitude of the number of applicants, number of people who take the ENEM relative to the number of high school graduates. In 2004, it's 1.5, so more people taking ENEM than graduating from high school. This is because you can take the ENEM whenever, right? And it has increased dramatically over time. Now we have around 2014 data, 9 million people taking the ENEM score, the ENEM test. And just pointing out, in 2004, what I mark here is ProUni using ENEM scores to grant scholarships here in 2004. So the importance of ENEM grows over time. And in 2010, also this dramatic increase because of Sisu as well. Sisu expansion, it starts in 2010. Some universities adopt the platform, and increasing over time as well. In terms of numbers of spots, not only higher education institutions, but the spots offered. So an institution could adopt Sisu, but not allocate all its spots, and gradually more and more spots are being allocated to the system as well. So the way it works, the Sisu system, is that students, they subscribe to Sisu, their ENEM subscription number, and ENEP feeds what the scores are. And then the students can choose up to 2 degrees option, and a degree here is a career institution combination. So engineer in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, or economics in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. The system is going to be open for 4 days, and students are free to change their choices over that period as many times as they wish. And each day, the system calculates a cutoff score based on maybe midnight of that day, and it makes it available for the students for the next day. The system closes, and then, so students, they don't know the final score, but they know the previous score that was calculated in the last day. And this should be a good indication of the relative demand of the courses in the system. So this is an example of how the system works. So this is what the student sees when he logs into the Sisu platform. He chooses 2 options of courses. This is history and astronomy in UFRJ, the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And it gives information on how many spots are available. There are 27 spots here for history, 10 spots here for astronomy. And it gives you what your score for that course is, because a degree can give different weights for different parts of the exam. So it calculates your score for that option, and it also gives you what is the cutoff score based on the previous day. So the student knows that my score here is 600 something, but the cutoff score is 738. So if I stick to this option, and this is the best expectation of what's going to be next day, probably I'm not going to be in. The system is open for 4 days, and here it says, look, we're in day 3. We have 1 more day left. And it also gives you your relative position, right? Not only you're far from the cutoff score, but you're ranked 260 in this option, I think 352 in this other option. So if you're smart, you better change this, because unless everybody gives up of this degree, you're not going to make it to the cutoff score. And you can also change as many times as you wish. This system gives you full information. You can try, pick and try all combinations of degrees and institutions and see if you will make it based on the last update of the system. It also, a little bit more information on the spots that are available. There's affirmative action going on, and I'm going to talk a little bit how we control for affirmative action here. So the data that we're going to be using is ENEM microdata with the test takers. And we're going to be merging it to higher education census. So the higher education, so we have a database with everybody who took the ENEM. And we also see the higher education census, people who are enrolled in higher education in Brazil. It's microdata at the individual level. It has rich information on the students for all higher education institutions, and some basic demographics that we're going to be using. So regarding migration, we have place of birth from the higher education census. But since we're going to be linking those 2 data sets, we also have place of residence by the time that they take the ENEM score. That's where they are right before applying to college. So that's we're going to be considering these 2 measures of migration. And we're going to be looking at federal public institutions. This is just a little bit of summary statistics of the data, just for us to have an idea of what dropout rates are and migration rates in terms of municipality and state. So this is a finer unit, so you would expect this to be higher. The state migration rate is a little bit lower. Our regression model, so we're going to be looking at a couple of short-run outcomes for this first student I entering college at year T and institution S. We're going to be controlling for a couple of time-fixed effect, institution-fixed effects, and our identification strategies is going to be exploring the gradual adoption of Sisu over time. We include a couple of controls, and we cluster standard errors at the institutional level. As I said, our fixed effect strategy is going to capture changes within institutions. And one thing that we can ask is that if this timing is actually valid for causal inference. So what we do here is to try to check for any systematic differences of the institutions that adopted Sisu relative to the ones that did not adopt Sisu. And we don't find anything that comes up very striking. So they're similar in terms of student characteristics. They're similar in terms of institutional characteristics. The only thing that comes out here important is that the federal institutions are the ones that are going to be more likely to adopt Sisu. And then we have a robustness exercise by looking just at federal institutions if they're substantially different than the other ones that we use as control. And we don't find anything striking as well, strikingly different. So just, we have several measures of migration: interstate migration, intermunicipality migration. And our key results on migration is that it does seem to increase migration by 2.6 percentage points. So these are just different specifications, different fixed effects, different ways where we classify whether the institution has Sisu. It could be also a program in an institution that has Sisu, but not all the programs in the institution that adopt Sisu. So we also take this into account. And it's pretty robust that we find this effect on migration at the municipality level, also at the state level. And this is something that you would expect. As you centralize the market, more options becomes available to students, and you would expect to find an effect on migration. In terms of dropout, in principle, dropout could be going, the effects could be going either way. On the one hand, you should expect it's a centralized system, it's coordinating, it coordinates better. So you would expect that courses, institutions in high demand, they should be able to attract better students that didn't have this information, or that was too costly for them to apply to these other degrees elsewhere. So maybe it's going to be attracting a better pool of students that is going to be better suited for the course and less likely to drop out. On the other hand, it might also attract, for courses in low demand, students that did not qualify for their best option and they just enroll on what's available to them, and it could increase then the dropout rates. So we're going to be looking at this variable dropout if the student has dropped the degree or is on leave. And we also find substantial effects of Sisu on dropout rates. And again, robust to several specifications. An increase, it's very sizable also, an increase in 4 percentage points on a base of 10%, so a 50% increase almost. Also, the results are also robust to different definitions of the treatment. So if we take into account not only the institution has adopted Sisu, but the number of spots that have been allocated to Sisu, and it also goes all in the same direction for migration and dropout rates. We do a couple of robustness checks. We look at alternative migration indicators. We look at the possible anticipation effects, and we redefine our treatment variables. We look at the effects of quota systems that are taking place simultaneously. So the system in Sisu, something that I didn't mention, you could apply for free competition where you compete with everybody, or you could apply through affirmative action if you come from a public school or if you're low income. And what we use here are some controls for quota policies that are going on at the same time. And we still find, so this is our robustness, alternative measures of migration, looking only at federal institutions, doing the anticipation effects, and we find nothing, and controlling for quota, and our results maintain.
Cecilia, 4 minutes.
4 minutes. The other thing, so I did make this big point here about institutions not being very different, the ones who adopt and the ones that don't adopt. But you could also ask if the migration and dropout results are being guided by characteristics of students that then apply to institutions that have Sisu. We look at a couple of characteristics of students and see if they change dramatically with the adoption of Sisu. We don't find much in effect, but again, these are basic observable characteristics. This is just the minimum check that we can do. Of course, they are less likely to enter. If the university has Sisu, they're less likely to enter through a vestibular and more likely to enter through an ENEM. That's expected, so that's not very surprising. The one thing that we found here is this effect on gender. Institutions that adopt Sisu are less likely to have women. And one possible explanation here is that the way the system is designed could be playing a little bit with the risk aversion of the candidates. And there's some literature showing differences in risk aversion by gender. So this could be one possibility. But even though I should point out that the effect is very small in size in any case. We also look at whether the effects on dropouts are mediated by migration, in the sense that if there are costs to migration, you could expect that these students who face these costs, they are the ones who are more likely to migrate. And we do find effects on dropout both for the ones that migrated and did not migrate. Of course, that for the ones that migrated, the effect on dropouts is higher, but it's still there for students that do not migrate, that are in the same municipality as the previous municipality where they took ENEM. We also look at the heterogeneity. So one possibility is that these dropout effects that we find, an increase in dropout due to Sisu, could be actually driven by the low-quality courses, the ones that could be attracting a pool of students that wouldn't otherwise apply for that spot. But we do surprisingly find dropout effects throughout different cuts of the average ENEM score of the institution. So what we do here is we calculate the average ENEM score of all the institutions in the last year, and we cut that by quartiles and run this regression separately by quartiles. And we also find fairly substantial effects on dropouts. It's definitely smaller the higher the quality of the course. So if you compare column 3 to column 12, but it's still sizable for low and high quality courses. So just wrapping up, the question that we ask is if Sisu induces student migration and increases enrollment rates. That's something that you would expect if it improves the matches. We find that it does increase migration, but it also does increase dropout rates. Doesn't look like it's mediated by selection of institutions into Sisu, also not selection of students into Sisu, although for gender there could be something going on. And one possible explanation here is that the availability of a lot of information could be making students game a little bit this system, in the sense that they could be enrolling in their least preferred, and since they can retake the ENEM score next year, they might be occupying a spot that they leave open the next year. So this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. The very good and the well-organized presentation. For our friends that eventually may not know the Brazilian system, ENEM is like the SAT in the United States. So it's an exam that you take as entrance examination. Sisu is the same SAT, but you can move from Rio to São Paulo. You take just one exam and choose the school if you have the scores. All the public universities in Brazil are free to Brazilians or non-Brazilians. Anyone that can come here to Brazil, take the examinations, pass the examinations, and it's free. If it's a medical school, it's a law school, any school, if it's a public school, they are free. We have about 50 million students, 50 million students in the basic education. So you can imagine two times the population of Canada waking up, taking a breakfast and going to school and be back to school. So 50 million of students. Almost 3 million teachers that need to be trained. The main thing is that they need to be trained continuously. We have about 7 million students in college, 7 million, and it's growing, at least the last data, we're growing at 9–10% per year. There is a demand for higher education, especially based on what was talked this morning by Professor, I'll call it, it's Professor Marcelo Neri. We have a premium for education. Would be almost impossible, a person like me with my age working, if I didn't have a good education. Also, you have a premium, you really make more money, like 15% per year of education. So, but the god of this thing is Professor Marcelo Neri, so he knows the things. Now I'm very happy to present Mrs. Maria Eduarda Falcão. She is CEO of Eleva Educação in Brazil. She survived McKinsey and the University of Virginia to be among us.
Good afternoon. Before I start today, I'm going to actually make a disclaimer that is, I hope that my contribution here today is going to be different in two aspects. First, I'm going to bring an on-the-job experience. So it's not an academic report. It's an experience of running a network of students and schools. And second is also an individual experience. So this is an experience of one group. So in no moment I'm going to advocate a specific public policy. So coming back to the theme of the panel, that is access to higher education and overcoming the barriers, what I'm going to talk about is how we currently, what we do so that we make our students succeed in first getting into higher education. And then I'm going to broaden a little bit the question and say that what matters is not just getting into higher education, but is also succeeding throughout the years of higher education and thereafter. And before jumping into these 2 points, I'm just going to take a while to briefly describe a bit about our group so that you can understand where we come from. So we are Eleva Educação. We are a network of K through 12 schools, private institution. We act mainly in two segments. First, we have proprietary schools, so we own schools. And second, we have developed a learning system that we use not only in our schools, but also we offer to third-party schools. In terms of proprietary schools in our schools, today we have approximately 30,000 students and more or less 16 school units. Our monthly tuition varies from something about 400 reais to 1,200 reais. So our target today is more of the middle class. We're talking about C+, B+, kids. Specifically here in Rio, our schools are located in the outskirts. So I'm talking about neighborhoods such as Madureira, Freguesia, Realengo, Vila da Penha, etc. And I think what this means in the end is that today we made a bet in the students from the outskirts of the suburbs. We believe in Brazil's rising middle class. We believe there is thirst on their part to rise based on merit and achieve their place in society. And we are betting on them. And at the same moment, they're also betting on us because these families commit a significant part of their monthly salary income to our schools. And we're also betting on math. Our schools, they have a very strong math curriculum. We believe Brazil needs more engineering, for example. And in this sense, we focus a lot on math. So these are two bets that we're making. And so far, I think we're seeing some good results so far. So if I had to mention, for example, EME is one of the toughest engineering institutions to get into in Rio and in Brazil. And last year, we placed about 70 students out of a total of 390 students in the entire Brazil. We also rank well in ENEM. Here in Rio, we are top. But as we saw in the ranking presentation, I think there are limitations to the ranking and we don't really evaluate ourselves by ENEM. And in terms of, for example, Olympics, Math Olympics, every year we send our students to participate in this Olympics. And last year, for example, Brazil, there's the World Olympics, Math Olympics, and Brazil usually goes with a team of 6. One of these 6 members was a kid from our school, and he won a bronze medal. So at the end, we're making this bet in math and in students from the outskirts, and so far it's proving a little bit of success. But now, actually, in 2017, we're going to go on and launch a school here in Zona Sul, in Rio. And we aim we dream that the school becomes a global reference school. So at the end, what I'm saying is that more than defining ourselves by a target audience, what unites our group is this desire for excellence. And we believe that we have a common skeleton that is excellence, and then we exchange professor methodology within our schools. So this is a little bit about 11, a little bit about us. So coming back now to the question that is, what do we do so that students succeed and get into higher education and then in life? So I'm going to start with the first one. Today, the main way you get into institution higher ed in Brazil is through ENEM. And ENEM in the last 5 years changed deeply the system. And it changed because it went through demanding not only a lot of content, but it demands that students know how to apply this specific content in their day-to-day experience. And this caused us to change a lot of our learning methodologies. And we changed in 3 manners. So first, we changed our materials. Second, we're changing the way we evaluate students. And third, and more difficult, we changing the way we recruit and train teachers. So in the first manner, in terms of material, what we're doing is, it's been in the past 2 years, we redid all of our materials in every subject. And basically, we went into the direction of ENEM, that is, we no longer just give content, but we always contextualize this content to a real-world experience. So let me give an example. Maybe it's going to be simpler to understand. Before, our math teacher will walk into the classroom and say, well, today we're going to learn exponential equation. He will go to the blackboard and he would start writing the equation. By this time, he probably had lost half of the class. And now what this teacher does is he actually goes into the classroom and he says, listen guys, did you hear that there's this rumor that Facebook is going to end? By this time, everyone is paying attention. 12 years old in Facebook, you know how they are. So then he goes on and he says, no, don't worry, it's not necessarily like this. This is just a rumor. You can all be calm. But let's understand, what is a rumor? And how did this happen so fast? And then he goes on to link how a rumor spreads, and he eventually gets to the exponential equation. So now every material in every subject we teach goes on like this. You basically engage student first with a real-life connection. Then you broaden the topic and you introduce something more abstract, like an exponential equation. And then you give a lot of exercises so that you can apply that abstract equation in real-life experience. So this was one thing that we've been changing in the last 2-3 years. Another thing in terms of how we evaluate students, basically what we did is we also went in the direction of ENEM, and we do all of our questions. Now we redid all of our examinations, and we do all of our questions also contextualized. And specifically in the 3rd year, students, so 3rd year of high school, their last years, we give them 6 trial exams 6 times a year before they take the ENEM, just like the ENEM in terms of hours, methodology, questions. Every little detail is the same, so that by the time they get to ENEM, all that tension is gone and they're very familiar and they can just focus exactly on the exam. And the last thing that we're doing, and this is more difficult, is selecting and training teachers. Like King Fernando IX from Spain said, it's easier to, destroy a kingdom than is to change culture. So in this part of training and selecting teacher, this is more profound, and it actually requires a change in culture. But what we're doing so far is that first we select teachers now less based on content. Before we were very content oriented, and now we're looking more towards whether that teacher can manage a class, so didactics. and also whether he can engage connecting to the real life. And the other thing we've done in terms of training is that we have really declared that training is a big part of our curriculum for teachers, and that we really believed on this continuous development. And in training, we have 3 parts in our program. First, we videotape teachers while they're giving their exams, and then we have a session with them to give feedback. This is not to evaluate. This is just for development. Second, we have several video lessons so that teachers can go on and look at these video lessons and actually dig deeper in content. And third, we have an online open forum for debate and exchange of best practices. So I think what we're saying is that we really believe in training. We believe in training led by teachers to teachers. And we believe in training that not only focuses on content, but also focuses on class didactics and in sharing experience. So this is what we've been doing in terms of getting students to succeed in getting into higher education. We've been changing a lot of our methodology in these 3 ways. But now I want to go to the big question in my view, that is, but what do you do so that your students not only succeed in getting into higher education, but throughout higher education in the marketplace and in life? I think the game, especially in the private K-12 field, where you can actually differentiate yourself as a group, is more on what you do to guarantee success in life than just what you do to guarantee success in getting into a specific institution. And in this thing, we've been also changing a lot the way we teach, and we've been changing for a simple reason. The world is changing fast. So we now live in a very dynamic world. Technology is making a big difference. You no longer are a lawyer or a doctor. You need to be an entrepreneurial lawyer, entrepreneurial doctor, and from there on. And so what we believe this demands is that you teach life skills in your curriculum. Some may call this non-cognitive skills, for example. So we really believe in life skills. We believe that once you get to your first job, what your boss is going to ask you is for you to communicate, for you to collaborate, for you to work in a group. So what we're doing is we're trying to bring these abilities into the curriculum since K-12. There is research by James Heckman, Nobel Prize winner, that basically, and I'm going to summarize, obviously, put out this. There is a strong correlation between academic content and success. And this is more or less of the order of 40%. But there is also a strong correlation between success and life skills. And this is of the order of 26%. So if there is something that is more than half the correlation of academic content, this needs to be inside the curriculum. If you look at the PISA, I mean, this year in 2015, they're already going also in this direction. So they're starting to access collaborative problem solving. So we really believe in life skill. I think there's a tendency of the world to go to this direction. And the hard things here is, how do you do this? How do you actually do this every day in schools with your students? We've been doing this for 2 years. It's hard. It's very hard to structure it, to measure it. But I'm going to summarize a little bit of what we're doing. So I think we're doing 3 things. First, we have declared what are our life skills. And now I just realized I lost the presentation, so I'm going to jump straight to the life skill part. Let me see. Here. So we basically declared that we're going to work in 6 life skills. And those are collaboration, communication, curiosity, critical thinking, perseverance, and proactivity. The second thing we did is we actually inserted in our curriculum a specific time to teach life skills. So every week, every student will have at least 50 minutes just for this. And the class is based on 3 things. It's project-based, it's reading and reflection, and it's interdisciplinary projects. All of these 3 things at the end are trying to do what? Trying to get students to work as a group to solve a bigger problem and reflect on that. And the last thing we did is we actually brought this life skill outside the classroom. So we promote this with parents, with our administrative staff. We paint on the walls so that we actually practice these abilities not only inside classroom but also outside. And in this way you go into shaping culture. What we haven't done, and it's the next step, and I think it's harder, is actually integrating this in the curriculum with geography, with math, with English, with Portuguese, and so on. This is the next step, and we're working on it. And let me just remind that it's hard. What we're trying to do here is not teach life skills for 500 kids or 200 kids. We're actually trying to teach this for our 30,000 kids and eventually 60,000 kids. So there's always this challenge of how you do this with a limited tuition, for example, 400 reais monthly, and in scale. So these are the things that are going on through our heads right now. So in terms of, actually making kids succeed in life, we really believe in life skills. And another thing that we're experimenting as well in terms of teaching our method and overcoming the barriers is towards individualization. In K through 12, we keep on teaching kids that are different in the same manner. So what I think has gone on in the world in the last years that we actually now have technologies that are opening doors so that we can teach everyone a little bit in a different way. So specifically, what we have done in our schools is we introduce something called adaptive technology. What is this? We haven't introduced it yet inside the classroom. We've introduced it in the homework part. So what happens is a student will get home and he will do his homework on the computer. And if he keeps on getting the questions right, he will go on to more and harder questions. And he will actually advance as much as he wants. At the same time, if the student does not get the question right, he will be directed, for example, to a video lesson so that he can revisit the content and then go back and try to do the questions. So what this allows is for everyone to learn in their own time. And the teacher in this moment, and the day of they do their homework, the teacher will the next day receive a report where they can see whether the class learned or not the material. So if you're a teacher, you see that 80% of the class got the questions more or less right, you can advance to the other topic. If you realize that only 10-15% got it right, probably something went on in your class and you need to give the class again. So I also believe that this really enhances learning throughout the year because of this short amount of time that you can measure results.
Maria Eduarda, 4 minutos.
Perfect. So now I'm going to wrap up and basically conclude saying that what I wanted to share with you today is that in terms of getting students to access higher education and succeed in life, we've been changing a lot because the world has changed and because of the reality of ENEM. And we have changed specifically in 3 manners. First, we actually developed now all our content to be contextualized because we really believe that it's important not only to know the content or even sometimes memorize, but to know how to apply it to real life. And we went on to this direction. The second thing we did is that we're really betting in life skills as an important thing of the K through 12 curriculum, because these are the abilities that the marketplace will demand once you get to your first job. And the third thing is that we're experimenting with new technologies that allows for student customization. And we've introduced the adaptive learning. And so at the end, what I'm hoping is that this contribution from our network can serve to broaden the entire discussion of how we succeed in getting to higher education, and how we succeed in preparing the students for life, and not only for our network, but that this can be an open discussion for our other private institutions, and eventually even the public sector. We really believe in change, and we're trying to change as the world is changing. And now to close, I'm gonna end with a poem from a poet from Portugal called Luís de Camões. I learned this early in my house, and he's from the 15th century, but I think the spirit of his poem says a lot of what I shared with you today. And it basically goes like this: times change, as do our wills. What we are is ever changing. All the world is made of change and forever attaining new qualities. Thank you.
Very good, Eduarda. Well, the motivation of our discussion is the access to higher education, overcoming the barriers. In Brazil, as I told you, we have about 50 million students on basic education, and the quality of the education is too much variable. You can go to a top-notch school, or most students, they go to average schools. So you cannot have a very good college education if you don't have a good basic education. So the main aim, I think, in Brazil should invest on basic education. We have, she mentioned that you have Olympics in mathematics. And this year, we have 18 million students that themselves, no one pushed them, themselves are competing in these Olympics of mathematics. And these exams tend to be more and more interdisciplinary. So the students should have a very good view of life. And I would like to open to questions and...
Bom, boa noite. Gostaria de parabenizar a Cecília e a Maria Eduarda pela apresentação. Minha pergunta se direciona para a Cecília, principalmente. Até 2010, você falou que o Sisu ele foi implementado a partir de 2010. Até antes de 2010, a gente tinha vestibulares das próprias universidades, a UFRJ, a UF, enfim, todas as universidades tinham seus próprios vestibulares. E as pessoas prestavam vestibulares para aquilo que elas sempre quiseram e para aquilo que elas sempre imaginaram ser um dia, um médico, um engenheiro, um economista, seja lá o que for. E a partir de 2010, o que a gente mais vê são pessoas do ensino médio, principalmente terceiro ano, falando, o que der eu entro, né? Seja lá, a pessoa sempre sonhou em ser engenheira e daí entra médico, porque passou, embora seja meio difícil, mas porque a concorrência é muito maior. Mas vão para carreiras que nunca sonharam na vida. Então, o que eu noto é antes uma concorrência ordenada e, a partir de 2010, uma concorrência muito desordenada. Pessoas largando o curso porque passaram por aquilo que deu a nota e não por aquilo que queriam. Eu queria ouvir um pouco mais de você, ou de vocês, o que vocês acham sobre isso, se o saldo foi positivo ou negativo com a implementação do Sisu em relação à educação. Obrigado.
Posso falar?
Ok. Professor Marcelo Neri.
Tá bom. Só uma pergunta para Maria Eduarda. Queria, quer dizer, na verdade, dividir uma palavra de preocupação com ela. Quer dizer, primeiro, parabenizar pelo trabalho, pela motivação, etc. É muito interessante. Acho que foi uma excelente combinação, as duas, o tema e a combinação coisa mais acadêmica e uma coisa prática, acho que foi excelente. Mas a minha preocupação, quer dizer, eu achei admirável o esforço e o foco dado para, vamos dizer, as camadas ascendentes, principalmente na periferia das grandes cidades aqui do Rio de Janeiro. A minha palavra de preocupação é que o que eu tenho visto nos dados bem recentes é uma queda não trivial de renda nas periferias. É uma crise metropolitana de grandes proporções, não sei se de grandes proporções, mas muito rápida nas grandes periferias. É mais ou menos como foi a crise do final dos anos 90. Então, acho que é preciso assim, ter um certo cuidado para apresentar um pouco de safety nets, um pouco, porque eu acho que vai ser o que os dados estão mostrando é que não há uma queda de renda no Brasil como um todo, surpreendentemente até agora, não é. É surpresa, mas não é. É a queda do PIB, mas não da renda das pessoas. Agora, nas grandes cidades e na periferia em particular, é uma queda bem grande, bem acentuada. E eu acho que a gente vai precisar ter assim, mecanismos, porque são áreas que não estão muito estruturadas, com a presença do Estado, de várias formas. Por isso, eu acho que é importante o papel de organizações como a sua. Mas eu acho que é preciso se preparar para essa situação e um pouco o cenário é um cenário, eu acho que de crise nas periferias metropolitanas.
Can I talk? My question is also for Cecilia. It's about Sisu. I think there are lots of benefits of adopting this centralized mechanism, but thinking about some of the problems, I think I would like to raise two issues. First issue is about the question of risk aversion and how this can play on the efficiency of the mechanism. Because since people are just watching about the cutoff grades the day before, so because of risk aversion, maybe they will choose not the first best choice, but maybe from strategic behavior they can go for lower quality course, and so this could kind of jeopardize the quality and the resource allocation and the efficiency. The second one, that I agree that Sisu it's increasing mobility, that's good, immigration, but I would like to know if you know about the profile of this migration, because my impression is that it's benefit, of course it's a benefit, but it's just for people that have already enough resources, financial resource to move from one place to the other. So, okay, it benefits, but it's a very small group, and I don't know if your regressions you can just make cross, if you have data on revenue, you can make some cross products of the revenue with migration to see if this migration impact it's really to high income people, or it's more equity and everybody's migrating. So it's about the profile of who is migrating, who is benefiting of this migration.
So it's a question for Cecilia. I was interested why you used migration as a measure of the quality of the match. So potentially other alternatives would be, how the students then performed at university, or some value-added metric.
Eu também desejo parabenizar as duas aí bem promissoras, jovens, mas com muito talento. E queria saber um pouco mais da Maria Eduarda, que em vários
momentos... Fátima.
In several moments, she stressed that times change, but one thing that did not change is the difference between children. And to have different models of education are always very welcome. Did you understand what? That you stressed several times that time is changing. Is that true? But one thing that is not changing is that we, as individuals, and children, and young people are different, and so we need a different model of education, and what you are trying to do is something a little bit different than the overwhelming emphasis on content. And so this is a challenge, because most of our exams to go into university puts emphasis on content, and Another thing that I would like you to talk about, it's you said that is a very new institution, maybe I understood like 2 or 4 years. And I also understood that you have thinking about different methodology and also with games and computers. So how are you doing this? Because although you have several games, those games are not translated yet. So this is really a challenge to do this. Okay.
Okay, thank you. She wants to make.
This question is, I really would like to congratulate the 2 panelists for superb expositions and have really added to our knowledge. Question for Eduarda Falcão. Eduarda, is it management or capital that is or focus on a specific layer of our society, which explains why Eleva is really doing a difference in Brazil?
Okay, now let's begin to answer because we have another final and very interesting table. Professor Cecília Machado.
Okay, so the first question, thinking about if this mechanism is preferred than the previous one, which was decentralized. It really depends on the features that are at play. So the paper that I mentioned, that is 2015, actually talks about the advantages of moving from a decentralized system to a centralized system. And there are clear advantages of that. But there are features in these mechanisms. So for instance, the centralized mechanism that they're talking about in the paper is one in which you have the deferred acceptance mechanism of Gale-Shapley, and people list all their preferences. This is not what's happening here. People are listing 2 preferences. So it's definitely a case where we're moving from a decentralized to a centralized system, but not with all the features of optimality that we would like to have. So it leaves room for these inefficiencies that I have documented here. So definitely true that maybe we can do a little bit better in arranging this mechanism so that people do not game the system so much and reveal their true preferences. And one way that they could do that is if they had at least a bigger list. They could submit a bigger list. Now they just list 2 options. And this also goes back to your question on risk aversion and strategic behavior. I think it's a feature of this particular mechanism. It's not I don't see it as the optimal mechanism. It's very close to the deferred acceptance of Gale-Shapley, but it's not precisely it yet. Regarding the profile of migration, I don't think we have lots of information on that, on on background or other characteristics, income characteristics, so we could see if costs really are something that are important. We think it is, but I don't think we can nail this down with this data set. Definitely not with the census, maybe with ENEM, depending on self-reports, on income self-reports, we might have something there. And the last question, migration as a measure of quality. When I talk to theorists about how do we evaluate this system, what are the outcomes that we want to look at, a common answer that I get is that, well, let's see if they list truthfully, or look at what they submit, look at what they get, and so on. Do you have an evolution of how they submit? So this is the basic outcomes that people look when they're studying this mechanism. There are other things that go on that we would like to see effects of the centralized mechanism on further outcomes along. One of them, as you mentioned, is value added. There are a couple of problems with that because we don't have many test scores throughout, and also universities, they evaluate students using different scores. Though there is a way for that because we do have an evaluation of the system for students that are graduating, though the content is also, not, at least it's a unique exam, but we would have to think if it's the correct thing that we want to measure as value added throughout their lives. Another thing that I have been thinking of as an outcome that we might want to look at is wages. So when we look at these people, when they go into the labor market, where are they going? Did they make the good choices? Are they earning wages, high wages? And I think this is topic for future research. We are not at that point yet in this long run.
Thank you, Professor Cecilia. Now, Mrs. Maria Eduarda Falcão.
So about the first question regarding tough times for families in the suburbs, I don't know exactly if there is something specific that we can do, but what we're doing is we're basically being very attentive to two things. So first, delinquency rates and whether our families are paying on time or not. So far, at least, we've been seeing the same behavior than last year. It increased like 5 or 10%, but not exactly a huge gap yet. So we're monitoring closely that. We haven't seen also a big evasion, dropout of students. We actually saw this number decreasing. And I think this is because we're acting, when a student is falling behind, we're immediately calling the family and acting on the beginning of the year and not in the end of the year. But we're monitoring these two indicators so far very closely because I really believe they should rise in the near future. And I think what might happen in the following years, given that this tough time for Brazil might continue for a couple of years, is that instead of actually getting the students from class C+, maybe we're going to start getting more of the B- or B, because then you're going to have like a triple-down effect. Personally, I don't like this so much because I like the idea that we are reaching the students and that they are succeeding in life, but this might happen. Regarding the question on content and games, what we're doing is that we focus on content because this is the reality of ENEM, but we're trying really to make it ever more relevant. And then at the end, we're really trying to balance a curriculum that, yes, talks about content and will guarantee that the students succeed and to get into their desired, their favorite education institution, but we're trying to balance it with other things that we believe, such as life skills, for example. So this is kind of a balance that we're trying to work on the short run and then the long run. And regarding games, and sometimes it's being another language, for example, what we do is actually we partner sometimes with third-party education institution in order to translate these games. We have done this 1 or 2 times, and it's fun and it's working and kids like. So I think we're going to be doing more of that. And in terms of our results and whether it's focus, management, or capital that we think it's important, I would say that it's definitely focus and management. I wouldn't really necessarily add capital. Capital helps, but I would definitely put focus dash a big dream. So I think we have a big dream and we focus on that. The second part is management. Management in the sense of processes. K through 12, a school is, in terms of subject, is simpler than higher education, but it's very intense, and we don't have a lot of regulation, but it's very intense the day-to-day because you have kids and parents all the time in your school. So you really need to take everything out of the school that is not related to learning. So you take all of that things of payment and bureaucracy, and you do it online or you centralize it so that at the end your headmaster and your professors and teachers are actually really focused just on one thing, that making students learn. And the third part is training. So we really invest a lot in teachers. We invest a lot in making sure that we have a great staff. And I think this is what makes the difference. So I would say invest in training, invest in people, invest in processes, in management, and focus with a big dream. I think this is what we do.
Thank you. Very good. And I just want to share three thoughts with you. First, the best medical schools in Brazil, we have more women than men. The second thing is that life is a marathon. You keep learning along the life. If someone chooses a course that really is not the course he wants or she wants, in Amazon, just because it's easier to go there, well, it's the price they are paying to learn to choose. But this happens here in Rio. If you go to a large university like a federal university with 50,000 students, some students entering engineering, and after 1 year, 2 years, and they want to go to theater. They want to do other things. So it's not a matter of Sisu, it's a matter of people. But it's the price of learning to make the right decision. And what would be really bad is that we invest a lot in education. 5% of the gross national product is invested in education, moving to 10%. No country invests 10% in education. So in some schools, good schools like Federal of Rio de Janeiro, you had some classes with 5 students, 10 students, 20 students. So with Sisu, you can have it full. If some students make the wrong choice, they would make anyway. That's it. Thank you for your patience. Congratulations for both.